This is the second part of our day. We are going to talk about something we did with Kevin and Elizabeth with Gillan about teaching with Lean and about the students' perspective of teaching with Lean. And then we have Jeremy Yarga. Of course, he's not come here from the US for a one-day meeting, so he can join us online. Hopefully, everything will work. Seems that the mic works now, so who knows? Anyway, so so this is about some research that I have done about using Lean as a teaching tool. Now, I didn't know anything about anything until 2018, when Kevin sent me an email and said, "Hello, I'm Kevin. Remember, we met 2 years ago at the LMS meeting. Will you be happy to do something about this thing I'm doing in the classroom?" And I said, "Oh, that's excellent. I'm always like out for research about proof and so on." We said to Kevin, "When are you starting?" He went something like tomorrow. Excellent. Let's do it.
Sorry.
So what happened then is that we quickly, as Kevin said, Nisol raised money with Imperial College, and there was money for pedagogical research available. We were lucky to have Tina for 9 months before she got a proper job, as it should be. That basically was a research assistant. And I came to know this idea about Lean. So I honestly did not even know that there were automated theory provers before I spoke to you. And I mean, I was a bit aware of the fact that people were teaching MATLAB and R and things like this in mathematics degrees, but this had not really come under my radar as a researcher. My research was mostly into fields in mathematical reasoning and proof and in assessment. I'm interested in the way in which we assess mathematics. So, okay. So the two things that revolve around the study of something like using Lean in the first year at university is, on one hand, we have a very large body of research to say about how students deal with proof when they come into university. There is a large, this body of research covers a lot of things, covers the difficulties like the ones that are put on the board now. So there is research that shows that students have very big difficulties in using definitions, in the proofs, in using mathematical symbols, in understanding why we need rigor, in finding the key ideas of the proof and the high level ideas of the proofs, in finding the modular structure of the proof, which is something we were talking about that Lean does well. But there are also other difficulties apart from this. So the literature talks about the epistemological gap when students come to university. Students are finding this idea that mathematics is a computational thing. You do some complicated algebra, and that's mathematics. They come to university, go to Kagin's module, and Kagin suddenly say, "Oh, actually, you know what?" And this is also like a big difficulty. So this is the first interest, and this is something that is very close to my heart, if you like. The other part, which is interesting, is this idea of programming in university mathematics. And this is something that is not new in the sense that there have been always often the modules in mathematics using MATLAB or programming languages for statistics. I think R is quite recent, but there have been others. But I think that there's been quite a big movement at the moment, which is being caused both by the fact that now it's much easier to have hardware. You don't really need a computer lab. Most students have now can go along. And together with the fact that programming is really one of the skills that employers look for, that has really kind of pushed both the introduction of programming in mathematics and the interest of researchers like myself in how the students go through the programming language. What we found, and this is mostly to study that Chris did, is that the main use of programming is in applied mathematics modules with things like MATLAB, so things like computational modeling or kind of like this, and statistics. Of course, art has not become very much popular. There is really not a lot of evidence of the use of automated theory provers. I only know Kagin because he told me, and Iannone because Kagin told me. So, exactly. So I guess Chris, when you read the study, you did not see this anyway, right? So, The other thing that interested me really a lot is the idea of the gap between research and practice. So this again is something that's kind of boiled in the literature quite a lot. We teach mathematics in a way that has no resemblance in neither in the way in which we do mathematics nor in the tools that we use. And this is problematic. Students end up thinking, and I said this once in another talk, that there's a very interesting bit in Frodenthal's book where says that his fellow PhD students taught that mathematics was done by sitting in a chair and thinking of a statement and proving it. Because this is the way in which we teach mathematics, right? Definition, theorem, proof, you have this definition, look, isn't this result great? Let's do it. The thing that is interesting for this talk is there are two things that now mathematicians more and more start saying that they use programming, some sort of programming, not necessarily to make theory proofs, but some sort of programming in the research, but they don't use it in the teaching. These are data from Canada, I think. No, maybe international, I don't remember. Anyway. And the second thing is that the few teaching interventions that I'm aware of that have been carried out, and this one I have on the board, involved programming, because I started as a programming language that was designed by educators and designed with manuals and exercises and everything. Is not used. Nobody uses it anymore.
But it has been shown to be effective.
Yeah. There are a lot of studies that were done in the context of things like group theory, for example. So this thing is not always an automated theory improvement, but it's a kind of programming that can help students write proof theory type statements. Okay, I'm not quite sure how exactly, but this was kind of quite big in mid-90s and was used sporadically in some pockets. This is all dying down. Nobody uses it anymore. Nobody knows about this anymore, apart from us that read the literature from the mid-90s. And this makes me think of whether this is the case, because this is not something that has anything to do with practice of mathematicians, right? So this is something that was invented by people who are not mathematicians in the sense they are no longer researching mathematics. So in some way, you can see how then the interest for learning is coming up, right? So it's targeting this programming idea, it is proof, is something that is likely to have some life in the teaching of mathematics because it's connected to what mathematicians did. And so obviously, this is one of the things. Once we were invited by Kevin in his module and say, this is my module, please come and do whatever you like, or whatever the ethics allow you to do. Obviously, I felt that, it's not like a little bit like you're in a sweet shop, right? So you know that there is this big problem and this very, very well documented sides of the literature. And somebody is doing something which has some legs to be kind of at least partially successful, or in some way successful, but nothing is ever the solution to all problems in education. Then we say, okay, that's excellent. So what is the impact on lean on students' learning? In terms of what? In terms of proof writing, proof understanding, handling symbols, clarification between the various language registers, technical language and mathematical language, natural language, and so on. But also about their perception of mathematics. Is the fact that learning will complain if something is not really rigorously proved? Telling the student that actually rigorous mathematics is important. It's a question that we ask ourselves. And we also are worried about how students would react affectively to learning. So right affect is really like a big word that when I say it in conference with a lot of people that are not in education, that there's a tendency to think this is not important. Actually, whether the student is happy or unhappy, or frightened or disappointed, or feeling helpless in using something is really incredibly important in the way that they will engage with the subject, with the tool, and so on. So we said, excellent, let's go away and do something else. And we are going to talk about two studies. I'm going to talk about the first study. I'll talk about what we've done next. The first study was on, like for confidentiality, was on with Kevin and with Kevin's students in 2018. We were interested in two things. So the way in which the model was structured didn't allow us to do anything particularly systematic for those students, because only a very handful became the experts. So what we tried to do is okay, so let's take students who perform equally better in proofs. So some students that will have the proofs marked and very good or maxed out marks or so on. Let's try to compare this proof qualitatively here. So this was the first research question: what characteristics are observed to be governing proof by students engaged with the. And the other research question is basically we asked ourselves what is happening. First year module, how many lectures, weekly seminar classes. Lean was not compulsory, in fact, was taught on Thursday nights, which is already interesting in itself. Yeah, well, I was thinking, actually, it's really interesting because when we were doing the data collection, I was thinking if I was a female student who lived a bit far away from the university, but I want to go back home on my own. So
Athena was doing that, right?
Yeah, no, I know, and she's been called off about this on several occasions. Anyway, so we have the students. Sorry. Sorry. No, it's okay. It's my. So we give the students this task. This is a task which, in some way, is mathematically meaningless, right? Nobody bothers about what the boundary numbers are, really. But we gave the students this task because we wanted to find the definition the students would not be familiar with. So they would be familiar with perfect numbers, some of them, but not with the boundary numbers. So we wanted to really see how they respond to something that we were sure was new for them. So we get them this task, and we say, tell us about this task. Okay, we interviewed 37 students, and we asked them to do several things. One of the things we asked them was to do this task. The data is, I'm only presenting the written part here, but the data, in fact, is the written part from the conversation we went through the written part. So if you don't know how to sleep at night, you can go to the paper and see the analysis of the dialogue as well. So what did we do? The first thing that we did is to realize very, very quickly that we couldn't say anything about attainment. So obviously the students were on Thursday night and Thursday with cabinets, mathematics probably by the end of it, the higher cinema. So there wasn't really any point in talking about this. So we did some investigation to make sure that at the start point, the students were not much better than the other students, which we did get the marks in the first test. So we did that to find out difference. And then we took proofs that they were written and scored them. So we asked them, somebody outside the research team to score them, because obviously you have to know, this person uses real, but so no, we asked them, in addition, knew nothing about the project or lean or anything to score the proof for us. And we compared like with like. And in the second phase, we analyzed qualitatively the written parts and the dialogues following these points, which had been suggested in this piece of literature, which are points that are interesting to look at for proof outputs. So the use of definition, the symbols used, the logical status of the statement, the high-level ideas, the modular structure of the proof, and so on. So what did we find? So I hope you can see. These two that I'm going to show are the second part of a proof. We couldn't put you a proof in, but they are the final part of two proofs which, by our friendly mathematicians, were scored with high marks, both of them. So we had said to this person, score this proof between 1 and 4. 4, if you're in a coursework of Excel foundation, you'd keep max numbers and from them. So can you see them as well? Huh? No. So I want to, what I want to say. So there are things I want you to. What? So there are things I want you to notice, right? So this guy on the left-hand side has taken this proof in the second part and started with level 1 into this, level 2 and into this, level 3 and into this. Now, we did not see this in all proof in that overt way, but all the proof written by students who have been on Thursday nights with Kevin had this kind of structure, even if not level 1, level 2, level 3. You could see that the proof was chunked in parts. But for the non-lean user on the other side, this is a proof that if I had to mark this proof in a paper, I would say yes, it's fine. But it's not as well organized, right? Like the second thing I want to show you is score really, really badly. Okay, so these are proof that I would have looked at and say, what's going on here? Now, you can see this. So on the left-hand side, I don't know, maybe I'm unlucky, but I'm very familiar with seeing things like this in exam papers. So it's not going particularly anywhere. And in many years ago, in an interview with mathematicians, he called things like this, a colleague of mine, random mathematics. Right? So they seem to be randomly arranged on the page. But look at the left-hand side. So the left-hand side is as ineffective and as wrong. But what's going on there is that the student seems to be bogged down by this idea of wanting to apply formal logic where there's no need for it. Right, so he's trying to use this Iverson bracket there and define this P, and I think it's a P, and I don't need to tell you that that's a linear user that got bogged down by this. I need to write this statement in formal logic, right? They got nowhere. And the other one is not a linear user. So this, we cut a little bit the number of examples that we wanted to show for reasons of time, but these are the kind of differences that we see. So once we finished with all the analysis of the proofs that we had, we found the following things. We found that the students that have engaged with Lean had a better use of mathematical language and mathematical symbolism. So you not very often found symbols used, misused, or not in not a kind of good way. One notable thing is that all these students explicitly said where their mathematical objects belong. So the boss and n, the boss not like kind of n is equal to this, but it was always be like n be member of natural numbers. And the proof read much better. So there were a lot of proofs that read that you could read like a piece of text, okay, which wasn't true. Even proof that I could mark for marks because the logic was right idea in the kind of property. They looked different. And this idea of the use of kind of reading the proof as a piece of text is quite important. There is quite a bit of research that shows that, in fact, when mathematicians are asked what they would like to see, they would like to see like this. So they don't want just to see, you know that, right? So proof that's only got mathematical symbols in it. It's not very useful to us, and this one's right. And then, of course, there was this idea of the breakdown. So these were characteristics that we saw in the users. So what other things? So we gave a questionnaire to 99 students, and then in some of the parts of the interviews, we asked the students as well. We asked them what were the barriers for them to engage with Lean, and this is what came out. So time constraint, difficult programming language, not interested. Okay. So this idea of the time constraint is a very big thing, and I think that comes out, some of it comes out from Lean not being compulsory. In fact, in the end, only 18 out of 300 students really engaged with Lean on a regular basis. I think that's where the 18 students are going to sit down Thursday night. The difficulties with Lean, also with those who have tried a little bit, can be divided in difficulty with the syntax and strategic difficulty, conceptual difficulty. This is something that comes to us from the computer science education H2. And the interest, so I put some quotes from students just to show, but the interesting thing that we noticed is that in the conceptual difficulties were bunched up, both conceptual difficulties about the mathematics and conceptual difficulties about how to use the language. Which obviously was a kind of further barrier. The happy ending of this first story is that for some students, so some of the students that engage, but also for some of the students that followed a little bit showing Lean during the lectures, their vision of mathematics changed. So what they thought mathematics was changed. And these are some things that the students told us that the experience will be made for things, so proving active that assume, enjoying finding out where the maths come from, or learning how to do so. So my end story of this first study is that it really is quite hard to do something like this and to convince the students to engage in something which is quite difficult to sleep. I think we can say this to each other in this room. It would be beneficial, but this is quite hard. So we need to really be a bit careful how we do the interaction with mathematics, because it has potential. For those who did it, they did it good.
Thank you, Paula. So I'll talk to you about the second study that we're currently doing. So it's not as far ahead as the other study because we're currently interviewing students. So I was doing a few interviews 2 weeks ago. So the findings that you'll see are very, like the first surface. We're just scratching the surface. Over the Easter break, we'll be looking at reviewing all the data, and then we'll have a few more rounds of interview schedules for after that. So having seen the results from our first study, we want to really see what happens when students actually prove in lean. So we wanted to see what kind of actions to do, what type of reasonings they're using. And also we wanted to delve even further in their epistemologies to see what they think about their learning, what they think about mathematics, and so on. So we now moved to a different university. Are we keeping confidentiality? We are working now with a different university where it's again, lean is introduced in year 1 module. This time it's mathematical structure, so the content starts from logic, functions, and then we moving on to isomorphisms and so on within the second semester. So very similar context as the previous one in terms of hourly lectures, weekly seminars, and lean not being compulsory. And this time, the auxiliary sessions are on Monday mornings. Again, not ideal for the students, but we have to take into account that if it's not compulsory, it does not actually land in a very nice way within the timetable. So in terms of the data collection, we are focusing on interviews with students. We had a little bit of difficulty recruiting students this time, and I think it has also to do with the possibility of the pandemic having an effect on that the students actually struggling with quite a few more things than they were struggling a few years back. But we now have a few participants, and we're hoping for a few more in the next few weeks. Now, the structure of the interview this time was a little bit different to the first study. So in the first study, we were asking pen and paper proofs. Now we're giving lean proofs to the students. So we're giving them a half-coded lean proof. The proofs that we're using up to now are proofs of logic. So you'll see here the half-proved proof in lean. And then they're asked to go through it during the interview and then try to complete it. So it's an if and only if statement. One side is proven, then you prove the other side. And then in the second task of the interview, the students are asked to prove a task on pen and paper initially, and then the same task in lean. And what we wanted to see also was whether how is their writing kind of informed or informs their lean writing. So we want to see if there's any relationship there. So before I show you a little bit of a non-lean proof and lean proof, I want to show you a few quotes from one of the interviews. So speaking a little bit about why a lot of people might not have attended lean and why this particular student wanted to do a little bit of lean. So I'll read out loud the transcript for people. So I know a lot of people kind of thought that they try and understand the lecture notes more and not worry so much about lean. But doing the exercise in lean made me think about the process of proving easier to think about. It became a lot more, I guess, systematic, so I did those exercises. And then similarly, there's a comment about writing proofs in lean and then translating them back to English. And another comment about the fact that it breaks down after you've done every line, breaks down what your goal is again, and all the hypotheses you've got. I think it made me really bear in mind what I know, what I've got to prove, and it does help me to go through more systematically. So there are a few things that are common with our student speakers that shared earlier today, their views and thoughts in terms of the systematic way that lean can help you prove things and structure. And this also links to what students in the first study told us. Now I'll show you very briefly the proof that the student wrote. So you see the structure. So this is the handwritten, but sorry, I forgot to mention The interviews are done virtually, so they cannot kind of handwritten. They're using whiteboard here, so that's why you see the typed notes. What was interesting to me to see is the similarities with how a lean proof would be written. So I must admit I haven't seen logic proofs for quite a while in terms of how a student would produce it, but to me it seemed that there is a particular structure that mimics the structure the student would do in lean. So I can leave it a little bit more if you want to see it. Know that people in the room are reading it and know about people online. What was interesting in these interviews was whether the student actually would go back to their proof that they just proved, whether they would look at the error messages that Lean would give them, whether they would focus on the Lean goals. And I could see quite a few students, and I'm guessing the next time we present results will be much more coherent about this, going back with their cursor at the beginning of the line of code, at the end of the line of code to see what they've proven, what was their goal before, have they actually achieved it. And quite a few times they were saying, oh, I need to do end elimination or end introduction. I don't know how to do this. Am I allowed to go back to my notes and kind of copy the code from there? And we are not really testing the technicalities, so that was an option that they could have. And they were going back to the notes provided by the lecturer, searching end elimination, copying the code, and then adapting it to the situation that they had. And this is something from computer science education that we know quite a few of the users do quite often. So very, very preliminary findings, as I mentioned. So it's data from 4 students that we have at the moment. More interviews take place later. It was interesting to see that the students usually, so that's, cannot really say a majority because we only have 4 students, they do not look back at their pen and paper proof, but they are actually relying way more on Lean. So when they solved it, it seems like 2 different separate tasks for them. And as I mentioned earlier, when they do not recall the Lean tactics, they refer to the lecture's own resources very, very quickly there as well. So as usually, we have more questions than what we start with. So we're really interested in the reasoning. This is what we are hoping that this study would actually provide a little bit more of a background for us. And then also on the role of intuition. So where does intuition come in? For examples, having like a rough idea or a sketch of proof. How does that come in to when you're proving things on Lean? And of course, the interplay with rigor that we saw in the previous study, that one student got stuck there. That interview actually lasted, it was the longest interview that was done with that study because that student was really keen on getting it right. But they were stuck in this formal way of thinking. They could not actually write their solution. And of course, the role of resources. So this is it from me. Thank you very much. And we have 4 minutes before Jeremy starts.
Minus 3 minutes for questions.
So thank you.